Our visit with Indiana High Baseball, presented by Marcus and Mack, voted best law firm and best personal injury lawyer 3 years in a row in the Best of Indiana County contests. Visit them online at marcusandmack.com. Big smiles on the faces of our representatives in the studio here this morning. Maybe not so many smiles on the lead up to the state championship, but my goodness gracious. It was fun for us to watch. We're going to ask them how fun it was to actually be involved in that high-pressure baseball. Our visit presented by Marcus and Mack, voted best law firm, best personal injury lawyer 3 years in a row in the Best of Indiana County contest. Visit them online at marcusandmack.com. Athletic Director Dan Roan, Coach Dan Petroff, and also on the coaching staff, Ben Hudock, in the studio with us this morning. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to have you all with us. Ben, pick that up and pull that up a little bit, Dan. There you go. There you go. So, yeah, there was this baseball thing going on, and Indiana High was involved, and you walked away with a great big trophy. That's my summation of it. It's probably a little bit more involved than that, huh?
Yeah, it was a little more dramatic than that, but, it went well. It's actually a storybook. I don't think you could write it any better than how it ended up folding out. After it was all done, I kind of digested a little bit, and if you go back to none of this happened unless you go back to the Ambridge game. That was probably the most important of all of them. And that was also a squeaker. I think we won. I don't remember 1-0. 1-0. And if that game we don't win, none of this happens. The Whitfield Championship doesn't happen. The state finals doesn't happen. So to me, that was the most important game of all of them.
That was 1-0 in 12, right?
I think so. Mm-hmm. Yeah. They all run together after a while. I know it wasn't 7. We never did the 7th.
Weren't interested in that 7-inning stuff this year for Indiana High, but all of that action, the tension. And as an athletic director, of course, you spend your spring, Dan, basically rescheduling games because you've had so much rain this year, and it's awful difficult on athletic directors. You get to this time of the year, you're not dealing with just baseball, but softball and other outdoor sports, and the spring around here is what the spring is, and we're used to that. But at the same time, you're also looking at a baseball team that is just putting together win after win after win, and you're at some point you had to say to yourself, man, this is going to be something special here. We have something good going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, from the start, you could just tell they were hungry from last year's disappointing loss, both in the Whitfield Championship and the state championship. And you could see it from the start. Kids were hungry. Coaches were hungry. It was just exciting from my standpoint to see it all come together. And, we rattled off, I think it was 11 wins to start. Then we fall to Connellsville, and then we rattle off, 14, 15 more at the end. It was just a different feel to it, and it was exciting to see. And credit to these guys, credit to the players for the grind that they did. There was a lot of games, as you had mentioned, with weather, scheduling purposes. We were on the fence of should we reschedule, should we not. We actually pushed the kids and the coaches through a lot of games and different scenarios to where fields were muddy. It was going to rain at some point through the game, but I think all of that leading up to it led to a certain degree of adversity. It helped us out in the Whitfield Championship playing in rain. We had a familiarity with that. So I think all of that to say we pushed the limit on playing games, but it was a good thing in the end.
Yeah, and you managing a pitching staff through all of that, when you talk strategically about we've got all these guys, we've got great arms, we can go from a lot of different angles pitching-wise. Managing it through the rain, keeping the shorter stints really worked out, didn't it?
Yeah, we had the luxury of having a bunch of guys that could throw. One thing I kind of learned as a player and took it as a coach is in the playoff games, just don't overcoach. Just let it all play out. And we had enough talent to let it all play out. And we could be short with pitching, which is a luxury to have. A lot of teams have to ride out their 1 or 2 arm 6-7 innings. We don't have to. We didn't have to do that. A lot of credit goes to Ben here. He handled the pitchers a lot. And let's get Ben's take on what he thought about the pitching.
Yeah, well, Ben, I remember last year when you were here and we were talking about the pitching staff and the young arms that you had, and you take a look at each of them, and through the course of a year, they get stronger. They learn a little bit more about what to do when they're out on the mound. They learn a bit more about getting into tight situations. That really came through for them this year, didn't it?
Yeah, and just like Dan said, you don't want to micromanage them because they are such great players. You got to let them kind of figure it out on their own. And they, going through that all last year, leading through this year, they took a big step forward. A lot of them. And it's, credit to their own hard work. Every day throughout the summer, the spring, the winter, and everything. So, for us to be able to roll 4 to 6 guys out there at any time makes our lives a lot easier, and it kind of helps out the situation throughout the playoff run.
When you were coaching these guys in the off season, and when winter came along and the preparations start then for building up arms and for getting these guys to focus in, it was obvious right from the start of the season, and we knew before then that you had a pretty special group of guys. But they have to get themselves ready to actually go into a season and be ready right from the start, especially in the WPIAL. There's no messing around, is there?
No, and you lose in the first round of the Whitfield as well. You don't even get a chance in the state run either. So for them to be ready to go right away, it's huge. We do a lot of live at bats throughout practice every day, kind of keep the hitters ready, the pitcher's arm ready as well. So just kind of creating a competitive environment every day for them.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course the offense for the ball club, and we talked about defense the last time you were here as well, but the offense, that come through in the clutch idea really played out well through the course of the playoff run, didn't it?
It did, and I think if you have successful baseball, it's all about pitching. Defense second, and some timely hits. You don't need. We had a couple games where we had 12, 13 hits and only had 2 or 3 runs. Then we had games where we had 5 or 6 hits and had 5 or 6 runs. So it's more about the timely hits as opposed to a bunch of hits. And we all were pitchers standing here, and as a pitcher, playing small ball, bunting a lot, stealing a lot, really puts a lot of pressure on the pitcher. So we try to create that environment, to put some pressure on the opposing teams.
Yeah. When you're working with pitchers about getting down off that mound when that bunt comes around, that's. We tend to take those sorts of things for granted, but you really have to be on your toes, and you have to make the throw.
Yeah, we just kind of stress that, that's essentially a free out, and you have to get it out either, whether that's at first or second base, wherever the play's going. But worst case is you don't get an out, so we really kind of harp on them, making sure they at least get an out somewhere on that. And a lot of those guys, they actually ask us to hit ground balls, some off the mound at practice and stuff, because they want to make sure that they're good on that and comfortable making that kind of play, because it's not one that you're always going to do throughout the game, so it's kind of unordinary at times.
Yeah.
But, they want to stay ready.
And getting over to cover first on a grounder to the right side.
Yeah, for sure. And like Ben said, we practice that, so our guys are used to it. And, backing up a little bit to the season, I think one thing that made the pressure situations a little bit easier was our schedule we played this year, and credit goes to Dan for making sure we play a tough schedule. It only helps, we get into playoff games. Those to us just seem like another regular game. So I think our schedule and the athletic administration does do a great job putting our schedule together.
Mm-hmm. As this season began to unfold, and you obviously knew going in that you had a pretty solid group of guys that could play some great baseball, and you had, I'm sure, mileposts that you wanted to hit, Whitfield Championship being one of them. But as it started to go on, and the guys was there a point at which they said, once we get them into extra innings, we're not losing that game? As they began to develop that sort of mindset that we're extra inning warriors, I bet you that was pretty cool to watch.
It was, and the crazy part about the whole time of after each game, each situation we were in extra innings, I know myself, and I think the rest of the coaching staff, you can read a lot in players' eyes, and I never saw defeat in any of them. We get to the 8th, 9th, 17th inning, you might start to wonder a little bit, but, as we're reading the kids, psych a little bit and, how they're dealing with in a dugout, I never saw a defeat in anybody's eyes, including our own. I never really, I guess I was never nervous being in the 12th, 13th inning. I always felt that we'd come out on top. I wasn't sure how, but I knew we would at some point in the game.
Yeah. Tell me about splitting a game over 2 days and on a long road trip.
That was tough. The rest of the extra inning games were kind of more predictable because it was the same day and just kept going, but I wasn't sure how our kids would react. The bus ride home was I felt a little bit like, the kids were, had the mindset of a little bit that we lost, but we reminded them that, you know, we're coming back tomorrow. The game's not over. You know, we got another job to finish, and they were excited to go at 8 o'clock. You know, getting on a bus that I don't even know what day that was, maybe Tuesday, Wednesday, but they were ready to go. And that game, I was especially proud of how they responded to that situation.
Sleep that night?
I did a little bit. Ben, maybe not as much. But I did.
A couple hours, I think.
Yeah. But deciding how you're going to approach that from a pitching staff standpoint must have been, you know, you probably had all kinds of scenarios going through your head.
Yeah, I probably sat up for a good hour or two thinking about that. And actually, Ben and I were texting, and we decided to go with Brady. You know, East Pennsboro, you know, played similar to us offensively. They like to bunt, they like to steal, and we figured Brady would be the best option to kind of, you know, curb that a little bit. And he went out and did a fantastic job. We couldn't be more proud of Brady. And, you know, he threw strikes. I think he only gave up maybe one hit. You know, and East Pennsboro was a really good team. You know, they were undefeated for a reason. And, you know, Brady held them at bay.
Well, state championship for Indiana High on the baseball field, a couple of really, really special years. So Ben, how do you follow that up? You've still got some arms coming back.
Yeah. I mean, just kind of treat every year as its own year in itself, and, you know, don't let them expect to win more, you know, again, but, you know, make them work as hard as possible again, and kind of just take it game by game and see what happens, and, you know, let them enjoy this for a while. But, you know, once we get back in the fall, it's a new season, and it's a new go time. So
Yeah, well, these guys are playing travel ball now. They're playing Legion ball. They're all over the place, and right now they're probably all on a beach somewhere, enjoying that time too. But yeah, they've got a summer's worth of play, and then in the fall they might be involved in other sports. But back on the baseball field next year, you let them celebrate a day and then say, all right, new year, forget about last year, let's move on.
Yeah, we'll give them more in a day. I mean, it's an exciting time for Indiana baseball, our school, the community. You know, you know, I think everybody was really proud of, you know, how it unfolded, and, you know, I think the way we won even made it more special. You know, to win it, you know, winning every game 10-0 would have been awesome. But, you know, the way it unfolded with all the extra inning games, all the one-run games, made it even more special.
You bet. You bet. Well, it was special for us to watch it all unfold, and congratulations again to Indiana High on a state championship in baseball. Everybody with the program. Thanks so much for coming in today, too.
Thanks for having us.
We appreciate that. It is the voice of Indiana County. It's WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160, WCCSradio.com.